Hello.
Hello, Woody.
Hello. How are we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well.
Okay, good.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn?
Oh, yes.
I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. It's a
That'd be great.
privilege to be working with you anyway.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me.
I read a little background and you've done a lot of great stuff.
So I appreciate you saying that, but I want to make it clear we're all in this together.
Well,
Like it's not like any original thinking on my part. I connect things different than you connect things, and we all connect things different than someone else. If we share what we're learning, we all benefit.
of course, of course. I met many years ago. I was in this, in the university lecturing circuit.
Ah,
Computing and electronic engineering, So,
very good.
yeah.
Yeah, my father was an electrical and electronic engineer for the phone company here in the
okay.
US. So
Yeah.
a lot of what he would talk about and things he would show me how to think and do things were very helpful to me.
Yeah, things have changed.
Things have changed.
Yeah, the kind of software engineering I used to teach is different today. So it's very interesting for me when you talk about estimates, because in large systems, which I used to be part of, like very large system, $1 billion plus, it's very difficult to get estimates right for hardware or
Exactly.
software or even integration. Integration is the biggest problem. Because,
Yes.
they'll turn up with something that just doesn't fit. It's like, hey, who specified this interface? And then, you have a 6 weeks delay when they go and try to find something. But, but it's very interesting what you're saying. What I
you'll
don't
see. Go ahead, please. Yes.
What I don't understand is, how we could, I guess I'll know more when I hear your presentation, but how
maybe
we improve that in terms of, because, you're going to have to estimate, because the people who are paying for it want to know.
So this talk isn't for the people doing estimates.
No.
It's for the people using the estimates, the people asking for the estimates. They're the ones who are the problem. They're the ones who they believe in something that isn't true.
Yes, but you see, the problem is those people never come to these presentations.
Right. So the reason I do these to whoever wants to hear them is because almost everybody that comes here will have a chance someday at advancing in the company to be somebody who has to ask for estimates.
Sure.
And I want to have this in their brain when they get there to go, maybe this isn't the right way to do it. So I'm playing a long game. It might be 10 years. It might be 15 years before someone who hears this talk today can put this into use. Do you understand? I'm sure you do. It's like, I don't believe I can change anybody's mind. I'll talk to whoever's interested.
Okay. So I'm gonna introduce you. I'll just give my name and tell people how the rooms work in English and Persian, and then how they can switch, and also they can send their questions for covering at the end as time allows. Okay.
Yes.
And then I'll give a little background about you, which I have here from a short bio that I was sent.
Yeah. So let's see. We will, according to our schedule, how long are we? we're going to go until
We're going to go for
ele-
2 hours, right?
for 2 hours. Okay, so I can use up the whole 2 hours. I will try not to.
It would be great to leave like maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes for questions,
do
because
that.
I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
If you can. I mean, if we can't, then
Yeah.
we say, you know.
So are you going to act as the intermediary to let me know when to slow down?
Did we agree that? Is that what we're going to do?
I think so.
Okay, but I'm gonna. Can I listen to the Farsi, Seper? I'm here with Seper, so we can see.
So that's what we were going to be working out. If we haven't worked it out, we'll just do what we can do.
No, I think we can do that because I have my
Finally, you hear me?
Hi, hello, Shari. Yeah, I
Yes.
can hear you. Hi.
Hello. Okay, great to have you.
So actually,
Here. Actually, I'm here through my second Zoom account too, so that I mean, someone is sitting here beside me, so he can be in touch with Woody while speaking. Is that okay,
Okay,
Woody?
can we test? Yeah, let's test that right now.
Yeah. Woody, is it okay if you guys can be in touch through chat? Is that okay?
Yep, I've opened up my chat, so let's
But-
go ahead and see
But the problem
chat
is,
message.
I think Sepper needs to actually give the permission in order to actually be able to type
Sepper?
something here.
Okay, so somebody needs to give you and your assistant permission.
آقای نامدار توی اتاق فارسی هن آقای مانلی؟
Persian room. Are you in Persian room, Seper?
No, I didn't activate the rooms, not yet.
Oh, there are no rooms right now, Shari. He's on mute for some reason.
Two separate Zoom instances.
Yeah,
Is that
Shadi
right?
has two. Yeah, now she has two.
So I'll wait to see that chat come in,
Okay,
and then
Shadi, can you get your
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. Okay, Sepper just actually set me as a panelist through my second account Zoom, so I think we can just type something now.
let's
Let
give
me
that a
see.
try.
Okay, do you see my message, Woody?
to all panelists? Hello, yes.
Yes, I see that. Hello.
So we're going to be in touch like this, I mean, in chat box. Is that okay?
Yep, and so what I
So,
want is just to say slow down or slower
Yeah,
or something
we're just
like
trying, in order to save the time, I recommend to actually be in touch through just, some coding words like slow down, pause, continue, go on, something like that. Is that okay? Is that
that.
work for
Okay,
you?
yeah, whatever you put in, I will probably be able to interpret it. So I'll be fine with that. Whatever you need to use
Yeah.
it, and I will take that cue.
I think
The
K,
only-
okay is fine for go on.
Yeah, K for okay, why not? And even SL can be for slow down if you feel comfortable with that. But the point is, Woody, what I only want you to just remember me here. That's all.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the chat is the way that I'm going to know I'm going too fast.
Yeah, thank you. That would be
All right,
fine.
so should you want me to share my screen or do I do that later?
I don't know if the session is started yet.
Well, hopefully we're getting ready to start because we have 1 minute, I think, before we're officially starting the meeting. And I just need to know when to turn my my screen on.
Okay, so Mr. Manadi, is there anyone actually set to record the Persian room, the Persian translation?
Hold on a second, Charlie. Woody, could you share your screen, please?
Yes, I will.
Make sure everything is working.
Oh, it's telling me the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Can you allow Woody to share his screen? You should be a panelist. You're not a participant.
Yeah, but it's telling me I cannot share.
Okay. Try again.
Okay. I have just shared my screen. Can you see that?
Ah, beautiful. Is that your wife? Is that an artist?
Yes,
Wow.
that's right. My wife writes children's books and illustrates them.
Oh, you're so
that's what
lucky.
she
When
does.
I do
I am so
presentations,
lucky. Yeah.
one of my biggest problems is getting illustrations.
Yes. So nobody would take me seriously if I didn't have my wife's art because
Yeah,
it makes
it
me
is
look like I'm
fantastic.
professional, and I really appreciate it.
Good for you to have such a nice wife.
Yes, yes. That's my only advice. If you want to be a speaker, Marry someone who can make great artwork.
Actually,
There's the advice.
I am also lucky to have one beside me.
Good, good.
It's a bit
Yeah,
late.
he's actually here to help me today.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That is ready.
So I'm ready to get going whenever you're ready to have me go.
فقط آقای مانلی در مورد ریکوردینگ ترجمه اگر فقط چک کنیم که اوکی هست، چون قرار بود آقای نامدار با یکی هماهنگ کنن برای ریکوردینگ اتاق فارس، یعنی ترجمه فارس. من نمیتونم قرار که هیچ کسی انجام بده.
did you hear that?
Actually, I will ask to Hala to do that.
To record it?
Yeah.
So I'm not supposed to record, right?
I can record something, but I might be switching.
Let me add Hala to panelists if I can. Promotes to panelists. So now Hala could be here. Panelists, okay. Here is Hala. Can you hear us?
So am I supposed to share my video through interpretation or not? Is it needed, do you think? I feel confident seeing Woody while speaking. It helps me through interpreting, but I don't think if my video sharing is needed here.
Okay, so Hala, شما میشه اتاق فارسی رو ضبط کنید؟
سپر من پرمیشن رکورد ندارم.
شروع میشه.
ادامه داری؟
Okay, it's okay for Hala. And now I will.
So فیلم یادت نره.
I cannot record, right? You don't need me to record it.
No, I will record it on my side, the English version.
Okay, perfect. So
In the questions and answers, somebody is asking how do they switch to Persian?
yeah, I'm going to explain that.
Okay.
Could you record too, please?
Do I have permission?
I gave you.
Who can see this transcript? Okay, let me see. Report on this. Okay.
Okay, so I will activate the interpretation room and then we can start, okay?
1 second. I just want to make sure I have what I'm going to say. Okay.
It's okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's just started. You can go.
So we can start.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Manali, and I'm a member of the DDD Iran community. I'm very happy to be your host for today's presentation. Today we have 2 rooms, one for English speakers in English and one in Persian, where Shadi will be translating in real time. To choose, please use the world icon on the bottom of your screen and select the language that you want. Any problems, please send in a question. We're also saving some time at the end, hopefully, for your questions. Please send in your questions and we will try to address them after the presentation is over. So we're delighted that Woody Zwil has agreed to join us today and present to the DDD Iran community. Woody is an independent, agile, and lean guide and coach who's been programming computers for almost 40 years. He is also an originator and pioneer of the mob programming approach to teamwork in software development. and is considered one of the founders of the NoEstimates discussion on Twitter. Woody's passion is to work with teams to create an environment where every one of us can excel in our work and life. Today, Woody's talk is titled Beyond Estimates, which is something he is passionate about. And we are extremely excited to hear about it. So over to you, Woody.
All right, thank you very much. So please let me know if you cannot hear me or if there are other technical problems happening, and we'll straighten them out. So as I was introduced, thank you for that very good introduction. I am a software developer. That's how I think of myself. And I started programming, I believe, in 1982, but I didn't start working for other people doing software development until about 1998. And then I became full-time at writing software within different organizations in 1999. So my experience goes back over many years and in many different areas of software development. Today, I'm going to talk about estimates and what I call, or I'm trying to call, beyond estimates. This is an important topic to me, but the first thing I need to do is look at a few things that I want you to think about. I usually gather this as information. I really don't have an easy way to do that today, so I'll use data that comes from other presentations, but think about these things. Think of what would be one word you could use to describe or use in place of the word estimate. One word. What would you say that also means estimate? Find a word that works for you. Another thing I want to ask is, do you do or make estimates? Are you involved in making estimates? I'd just like you to think about that. Are you someone who is being asked to make an estimate? Another thing I'd like to ask you to do is think about, do you use estimates? Do you have to go to someone else and say, I need an estimate, and they give you the estimate? Now, remember, we're only talking about software development. The last thing I want you to consider is how good are estimates working for you and your organization if you're doing software development? So think about that for a second. Rate the result of using estimates in your organization. So we just want to know, what's one word that we could use in place of the word estimate? We want to know, are we making estimates? Are we using estimates in our work? And how good is it going for us in using these estimates? So let's continue on. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to give you kind of a disclaimer or a warning and our goal, what I'm trying to do here today. I use this quote from Peter Block. The value of another's experience is to give us hope, not to tell us how or whether to proceed. I'm going to share with you how I use that. Because some people become defensive when we talk about practices that they believe work. So I'm going to ask you to try not to be defensive today. Don't protect your current belief. Be open to new ideas. That's all this is about. Keep an open mind. Without an open mind, we only have one option, whatever we currently think. We need to have more than that, more options available. This is worth thinking about. So I like to use this saying from Grace Hopper, who was a very well-known and very important computer pioneer in computers and in software development. She said this: humans are allergic to change. They love to say, we've always done it this way. And she says, I try to fight that. She, I think, understood that just because we're doing something a particular way right now, based on our past, it doesn't mean we cannot change. We should be able to always be open to change. So that's important to me, and this is how I use that. I want to provide a start at exploring what is working, what isn't working, and to encourage you to accept nothing at face value. Even the things I say, just because I say them doesn't make them true. It's just something I think about. So that's where we're at. Let's go on. I want to share how this thinking started for me, why I even think about this or want to share this information. This started for me back in 1999, at least very focused on software development. I worked at a place in early 1999 for 3 months. It was a very short contract, and this company needed help to do some work for another company. This company was helping another company, and they hired me to manage a team of programmers, so to speak. This is what I noticed, that they were doing things in a manner we would call extreme programming. They didn't follow everything that comes under that title of extreme programming. But this was before Agile, before the term Agile was coined as a term used in software development. That happened in 2001. They did not do estimates. This is what I noticed working there. They were highly effective, and it was a wonderful way to work. I paid attention to everything that was going on there, took a lot of notes, and I wanted to get more of that same thing at the next place I worked. So I went looking when this contract was up. I went looking for another place to work. And I found a place that seemed to do some things that were kind of like Agile. Again, Agile didn't yet exist. But here's a short list of things. We don't need to read this over. The main thing I want to point out is they were doing iterations. That means they were going to do a little bit of work, reflect on their work, and do a little bit of more, and then reflect on their work. That reflection they called a lessons learned. At the end of every 6 weeks, they would get together and talk about what went well, what went poorly, what might we want to do better. In our very first retrospective, this is what we found. We got together after 6 weeks of work, and everybody gave their ideas, and these were the prominent problems I saw. Our estimates were off. They were not helping us. The requirements weren't clear when we started. In other words, we didn't do a real good job of gathering the requirements. And the requirements kept changing. Even though they had written down requirements, they didn't stay as being the requirements. I hope you can see these 3 things are related. So now we talked about how do we fix this? What are we going to do to make this better? These are the things they basically said. We need to get better at estimating. We need to get better at understanding the requirements. And we need to control the changes. This is what they determined would help us going forward. Now, I wasn't a young man already at that time. I was 45 years old, and I didn't think this was going to work. But I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to lose my job. So I didn't say anything. We went off to do our next iteration. During the second iteration, we had some problems. And at our retrospective or our lessons learned, here's what we noticed. I'm going to ask you even, what do you think the 3 big problems were? And I'm going to guess it was the same 3 things. So we asked ourselves, how are we going to improve this? And I think it was the same 3 things. We need to get better at estimating. We need to get better at understanding the requirements. We need to get better at controlling the change. Personally, I don't think these are the right things to do, but that's what we did. So at the end of the next iteration, we did our retrospective again, and I don't think I need to tell you what came out of our lessons learned. The same 3 things. Now, this is a pattern. And at that point, I was there for 4.5 months, I believe. I got up in the meeting and I said, I think I see a pattern here. And this is what I explained. This pattern is one I've already seen over and over in my career in other things. And I think we need to pay attention to it. If we do something and we follow through with it the same way each time, and improvement doesn't come, then maybe we need to rethink our approach. By following this pattern, I gave it a name. I called it, this is the cycle of continuous no improvements. If we do the same thing over and over, and it doesn't result in change, then we've got to try something else. Now, there's a real important reason that I think that this never works. But let's talk about that just for a second, because I've watched this pattern over the last now 23 years, and I've seen it over and over again at numerous places I've worked and companies I've visited. In the last 20 plus years, I've probably visited over 500 companies and talked about these things, and I see this everywhere. This is essentially the problem, and we're not going to discuss this too much today. But I believe we're addressing symptoms, and we're not addressing actual problems. Those three items, that the estimates weren't helping, that we didn't really understand the requirements, and the requirements kept changing, are all parts of the same overall or underlying problem. We're not going to go too much to details into that, but one of those problems is, we cannot predict the future. So let's see where we go with this. I want to share this idea. It's called Breen's first law. I think it's pretty telling. At some time in the life cycle of virtually every organization, its ability to succeed in spite of itself runs out. Most companies start out making sufficient money to grow, but at some point they're going to have grown so much and they're going to have so many problems that they can no longer continue doing business. So this is sort of what this is about. And I think one of the problems is we depend on things like estimates to guide our work. And eventually it never helps us. That's what I'm trying to share today. We'll see why I think that. But it never really helps us. But eventually we have too much to deal with, and it harms our ability to stay in business or to keep the organization going. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. A lot of people think they understand what NoEstimates is, and I'm going to explain what it means to me. Okay, NoEstimates is not for those using the estimates. If someone asks for an estimate because they need it, they are the one this talk is for. They're the one that this information is for. If you're asked to do an estimate, then you probably need to do that estimate. That's part of what they expect from you in your job. So it's not for those making the estimates, it's for the ones using the estimates. So remember, earlier I asked you, do you do or make estimates? And if you do, this talk is relevant to you, but it's really meant for the person using the estimates, the one asking you for estimates. I'll give you a little bit of a warning. This is controversial stuff. I would be careful about going to my boss and saying, we don't really need to use estimates. I just saw this talk by this guy and he told me we don't need to use estimates. And my warning would be cautious in doing that. You may no longer have a job after you bring that up. Okay, so this is the point. If the system we work within requires that we do estimates, then somebody has got to, or that we use estimates, then somebody's got to do those estimates. So this is really about the system we work within. If the system expects people to need to use estimates, somebody has to create those estimates. Let's go on. So this is very simple to me. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to say, just because we do things the way we do them, should we continue doing it that way? Should we do things just because everyone else does it this way? Should we continue doing that thing? It may not be to our advantage. There's a simple question we can ask ourselves. Are estimates serving us the way we would like them to? If they are not, that's where the problem comes in. So how do we answer this question? Are estimates serving us the way we would like them to? If we can answer yes, we like them. They give us a lot of value. We're really happy with it. So we just can continue using them. However, if we answer no, then let's explore why and consider what we might do about that. I think this is a simple approach. This goes for almost everything we do. Okay, So what I want to talk about is a little bit on a definition. What do I mean when I said estimate? Now, remember, I asked you earlier, what is an estimate? Give me one word that you could use in place of the word estimate that contains the essence of what an estimate is. Now, normally I would gather this on Post-it notes or something, but we're going to use the results from another session I did where I was able to collect the results. So I'd ask this question, they wrote it down on a sticky note, and this is essentially what we got. I hope you can see about half of the answers is it's a guess. It's an approximation. It's a best guess. It's an assumption. It's a prediction. It's a forecast. Those are all pretty much the same thing. If that's true, we really need to explore that. Then the other half are things like the time, the size, the effort, the work. That's not what an estimate is. That's the unit we're estimating about. Like we're going to estimate the time it will take. We're going to estimate the effort it will take. So instead, this really isn't a word we could use. We would never say, can you time me the time it will take to do this? You know, so we could say, can you guess the amount of time it will take? Can you estimate the amount of time it will take? It's not a plan. An estimate isn't a plan or a budget. We use estimates to make plans. We use estimates to create budgets, but the estimate itself is not the plan or the budget. And then there's some dysfunctions, like it can become a deadline. It can become an expectation or a commitment or a pledge. And there are even worse dysfunctions than that. Let's go on. If we did this as a word cloud, this is what it often looks like. This is a rather simplified one. But you see the word guess. Guess is the big one. Okay. So we need to talk about what does time really mean? If we're estimating time, what do we mean by time? I'm going to give two different uses of the word time. The work time, that's the amount of time that it takes to do the actual work, not including waiting. That means if I work an hour today and an hour tomorrow and an hour in the next day on this particular thing, and when I put those three together, I worked for 3 hours to accomplish this. But the time between when I started and when I finished, that's called the cycle time or the elapsed time. It includes the time we worked and the time we waited. I have a whole other talks that deal with this, but the basic idea is the amount of time that passes from when we start till when we finish, and it's delivered to the customer. So both of these kinds of time are important in an estimate. The work time might be important so we can know how much effort do we need to charge for? How much time are we going to charge for? If they work an hour today on this thing, then that's a billable hour. We'll charge for that hour. The elapsed time is something the customer is also interested in. When will it be done? That's the elapsed time or the cycle time of each item or the whole project. How long from start to finish, not including all the waiting that happens. So I need to use this information and what we gathered about what do we call an estimate to come up with a definition of what is an estimate. So we are discussing very specific types of estimates used for a very specific purpose. Otherwise, this becomes a complicated discussion. I'm really talking about the domain of software development. So our working definition could be something like this. An estimate is a guess, as we already saw, of the amount of time or the cost or whatever it is you need to measure to do some specific amount of work to create some software. And that could be a task, a feature, a product, a whole project, whatever we want to call it. That's how I'm going to define an estimate. It's going to be a guess about the amount of time, usually, of what it will take to do some defined bit of work, some small bit of work, usually. Okay, using that definition, we're going to go on. Remember, I'm only talking about the domain of software development. Otherwise, it gets very complicated. So let's take a look at something that I think is really important. Why do we use estimates? Why do we use them? Now, normally I would do this, I would prefer to do this as an exercise, but let's explore some of these things. These are all related. What do estimates try to do? What are they trying to do for us? And why do we use them? And what do we use them for? And what do we do with them specifically, the actions we take? These are very closely related questions, but I'm trying to cover a kind of a broad concept here. So what do the estimates try to do? Estimates, in my opinion, they attempt to predict the future, to tell us something about some part of what we're doing so that we can maybe have a better idea of what it will take to do something. So, for example, when will this be done or how much it will cost? That's pretty straightforward, right? What can we get done in the next 2 weeks? That's very common. How big is this thing? Or how much work will this take? There are other questions we'll ask, and we'll come back to this later. But you get the point, I hope. So this is information. If you give me an estimate about how long it will take to write this feature or this part of a feature or this class or this web service, microservice you're trying to write, that's information, but I don't think it's very meaningful information. You're giving me a guess as to how long something might take based on very scant information, usually. And if the information isn't scant, that means if the information isn't, or I should say, the information we're basing our estimate on is not a small amount of information, it's usually too complicated to be able to come up with a good estimate. I don't think this information is meaningful, and that's what this whole presentation is about. I like to ask it this way: are these facts? If they were facts, we wouldn't call them estimates or guesses. They're guesses. They're not facts. But what do we do with this information? That's where we're getting to the heart of this thing. What do we do with these guesses? We use these estimates to help us make decisions. That's the only reason, the only meaningful reason I can find for doing estimates, because we need to make some decisions. Otherwise, what are we going to do with them? Well, some people will say it sparks a conversation we want to have. I can kind of see that, but we can have that conversation without the estimates. So I'm not really sure this is worth use, but why are we having the conversation? Because we have some decisions to make. So that's sort of a roundabout way to say, really, we use estimates to make decisions. If you know of some other way or some other use for this, please let me know. I'm going to review that just for 1 second. What do we do the estimates for? I'm going to go back just a bit. We use the estimates to help us make decisions or to spark a conversation that will help guide us making a decision. That's what we need that information for. So, what are we trying to decide? Think about that for yourself. What decisions are being made with the estimates that we are gathering? What decisions do we want to inform with those estimates? One example is, should we do this project or do that project? We're going to look at both projects, try to make some kind of decision about how valuable they are to us, and try to make some decision about or gather information about how much will it cost us. And then by using that information, we can determine which of these two projects we should do. Now, I think that's not actually a good use, but that's a common use. Okay. Very similar is this idea. Should we do this project at all? So we're not comparing two projects. We're just looking at one project and we're saying, will its cost outweigh its benefit? So we use an estimate of the cost and an estimate of its benefit. And then we say, no, that's not really going to pay out. I want to make it clear. I'm not talking in this talk. Beyond estimates isn't about value estimates or estimating the value of our software. I think that's even more problematic than estimating the costs. Both I don't think are helpful. So which project should we choose to do in the next fiscal year? We're planning for next year's budget. We have so much money to spend, so we have to look at all the projects people are asking for and decide which ones we'll do or what efforts we'll do. This is kind of a critical thing. If we're looking forward at least a year, because the budget's being made a year ahead, in the year prior to the year we're budgeting, is that a reasonable thing to do? If it's trying to figure out what we'll spend our money on next year, do we have enough information to make that decision? And I would say probably not, but let's go on from there. So how many people should we hire? This is a question this is something I think that people try to answer. We've got to do this project. We need to figure out how many people we need to hire. So they make an estimate. The estimate is for how long it will take for some people we don't even know to do some work. How do we know how long it will take those people to do the work? We have no figures that will allow us to understand that. I think that's problematic as well. Okay, I have several more of these, and hopefully it's clear these are the kinds of decisions we're trying to make. Now, that's just an example of some of the kinds of decisions we're trying to make. We want to make decisions so we can do planning. That means we need to know what order we'll do things in. How do we prioritize? We want to know, how can we schedule? If this thing's dependent on that thing, we need to do the thing that it's dependent on first before we can do this other thing. So we want to schedule. When will we bring on these people? When will we bring on those people to do that work? Things like that, scheduling. We want to understand what can we work on in the next few weeks. These are the kinds of decisions we're trying to make with estimates. Now, this is kind of all quite interesting to me. Let's ask this question. What is wrong with this? I think you can already tell me. What is wrong with this? It's that we're basing these very important decisions on guesses. And we're not usually happy with the results. That's pretty straightforward. We cannot predict the future. If I could predict the future, I would not need to make my living helping people learn about programming, because I would be the richest man in the world. If any one person held the secret to predicting the future, they would hold the secret to power. They would hold the secret to ultimate wealth. If we could predict the future, we wouldn't even be thinking about how do we get better at estimates. We'd already be doing it. Decisions based on being able to predict the future are faulty. They will never work. You sent a little message there. Here we go. People often tell me this. Estimates help us make decisions. This is not a difficult thing to make decisions. I say we do not need help making decisions. I can make a decision in a second with no information whatsoever. I can say yes or no based on no information. We do not need help making a decision. I brought with me today a decision-making tool. It's a coin. I can flip this coin, and if it's heads, we do the project, and if it's tails, we don't. It's that easy to make a decision. We don't need help making a decision. What we need help with is making good decisions. Okay? If we can have help making good decisions, and if estimates did that for us, I'd be very happy. I've never seen that. I don't believe estimates help us make good decisions. Now, I'm going to try and cover how I work when we get towards the end of this talk. I think we have enough time to do that. I'm going to be really clear here. We don't need help making decisions. We need help making good decisions. And if the information we're using is just guesses, that's not helping us make good decisions. At best, that's helping us feel good about our decisions. There's a big difference. People will often say, well, we did the best we could with the information we had. I hope you understand. So how do we prove or evaluate that it was a good decision? I have to type a message in. Sorry, I'm communicating with the people doing the interpretation. So how do we evaluate or prove we've made a good decision? This is very difficult, but it's not uncommon in our industry to judge the success of our estimating process to be, this is very straightforward, it was done on time and on budget. I hope you can see that is not a meaningful way to judge success. But in our industry, that's often what we use to judge success, to judge the value of our estimates. It was done on time and on budget. I would rather say we got a lot more done, and it's more of what our customers wanted, and it took a little longer to do or a lot longer to do. It's not a success if we got done on time and on budget if our customers won't use the software, or nobody will buy the software, or they reject the software. The measurement of success is not time and budget for software. I'm going to share some information that came along starting in 1994. It's called the Chaos Report by a group called the Standish Group. They were studying what is the success rate of software development projects. They polled a number of large companies. They gathered information on hundreds or maybe thousands of projects, and they started gathering these numbers every year or two to create these reports. The first one I'm aware of was in 1994, and they made a chart like this. The green represents success. Well, the red represents outright failure. Failure means it wasn't done on time or on budget, or it got canceled and nobody ever used it. Okay, it just didn't get, it either got delivered and then removed, or nobody ever used it. Challenged means it got done, but to get done on time and on budget, we had to cut some features. Some of the stuff wasn't what people wanted, but it did get delivered and maybe provided some use. That's challenged. Most projects you can see fell into challenged. It wasn't what we wanted. It wasn't done in the time we wanted. And then there was only 16% success, which meant it was delivered on time and on budget with the features asked for. I hope you can see that's not a meaningful measure of success. Just because we asked for a feature doesn't mean it's something we actually wanted, or I should say currently want. Maybe when we thought about the project, these are the things we wanted, but we learned along the way, or at the end, it isn't actually what we wanted. So I think this measure of success was actually not that good. But let's see how we do it in 2020. I believe this is the last time this was done. In 2020, they changed the chart a little bit. Things improved. Failure, 2/3 the amount of failure. Challenged, about the same. Success, about doubled. That's still very poor. But still, how did this happen? So look at this. I'm going to show you the other one again. We went from this to this. It's not super big improvement, but it's a little improvement. But how did that improvement happen? Well, they actually wrote quite a bit about this. And they basically said, if we have a good place with a good team and good sponsor, we got better results. And if you read all this stuff that they talk about, a lot of it is about being what we might call being agile. The idea of working in smaller increments, delivering very frequently, having lots of retrospectives that are very meaningful to us, learning from what we've delivered, lots of things here. But let's go on, okay? So we can review. Are the estimates working well for you? That's the question I ask every time I go someplace where they want to get better at their estimates. They're going to have answered this yes or no. The estimates aren't working well for us. We need to get better at it. If they were answering yes, they probably wouldn't be asking me to come do a talk. If they're working well for us, we don't need to even think about it. Everything's going great. But if we need to get better at them, I think we have a problem, because the industry is trying to get better at estimates for 40 or 50 years. When I first became aware of estimates in software development, people were having problems with it 40 years ago. Nobody has stopped having problems with it. Some people make claims that it's better, but I don't think that it is. So we're on to part 8. This is kind of where I would like to share a couple big problems that we often don't pay attention to that make estimates very, very difficult for us. So first of all, we want to believe, or we want to be able to predict the future. And we really want to believe that. So we start believing that we can predict the future. We so desperately want to be able to predict the future, we start believing that we can. That's wishful thinking. Just because we want something doesn't make it the truth. Let's see where we go with this. Kahneman, I think, talked about the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy is basically this: predictions about how much time it takes to complete a task display an optimism bias. We have this thing called optimism bias, and we tend to underestimate the time needed. Now, there are a lot of sayings that go along with this, but this was research showing we have optimism bias. Things will take less time than we think, things will take longer than we predicted they would take. That's what we're trying to say here. It will take longer to do something that we thought would take a less amount of time. There are other ways of saying this, and I'll share one in a second, but that's just one of many biases. We're not going to go through all of these. Every one of these affects us. I'm probably only going to talk about one, the anchoring bias. Okay, so Hofstadter's law, which I think is really brilliant, says this: it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. So if we go, oh, it's going to take longer than we are planning, so let's add some time. Hofstadter's law says it will take even longer than that, because if we add some more time, it will take even longer than that. Parkinson's law said work grows to fill the time we've allotted for it. It will take it, whatever time we put in place, we will fill that with the amount of with work. If we think it'll take twice as long, we'll fill that. If we think it'll take twice as long as that, it will fill that. This is not a good way to work. Okay. So I want to talk about priming and anchoring and some actual research that was done about this in 2008 by this fellow Jorgensen through the IEEE organization. Okay. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but you can find this information online. They took some projects and they took a document, let's pretend it's a document of requirements. And they provided the some different groups, isolated groups, these requirements, and they told them some information about it. They gave them some guidance, and this shows us the idea of anchoring. The control group was given no guidance, and they said it would take 160, we'll just say hours, some kind of units, 160 hours to do the work in these requirements. Okay. The other groups were given different guidance. Group A, we think it's going to take 800 hours to do this work. We would like to hear your estimate. Group B, we think this will take 40 hours to do this work. We'd like to hear your estimate. And Group C, we think it'll take 4 hours to do this work. We'd like to hear your estimate. Now, try to guess, how did that affect the resulting estimates? If the control was 160, what did these other people do as an estimate given this guidance? This is kind of interesting. Group A, I can imagine, said 800 hours? No, it'll only take 300. They're way out. Group B said 40 hours. It's going to take more time than that, probably at least 100 after they estimated this. Group C, they're all given the same requirements, was told it would take 4 hours. Whoops, they came up with 60. So both of these teams thought it was too little time. This team thought it was that much time. I wonder if they had primed a group with the 160, what they would have said. Would it have been more? Would it have been less? Yeah, this is priming or anchoring. I'm going to give you 2 more examples, maybe 3 of this. Other guidance, same, let's just say it was the same project or some other part of this project, okay? Some small part of it. Group A is told it's a minor extension. Group B is told it's new functionality. Group C is told it's an extension. That means there's existing software and we're adding something to it. There's the control group's response. All 3 of these are anchors. You're told what we perceive this to be. Now, how does this affect our final numbers? Very interesting. A minor extension meant we estimated it would take less time. New functionality, we estimated it would take almost double the time. Exact same requirements, slightly different anchoring. I hope you're starting to see we are all susceptible to the anchoring. The anchoring will change how we think about things without us knowing that it's done that. Now, this happens in every aspect of our life. Anchoring is what other people do to us to sell us things or convince us of things. It's well known in advertising. It's well known in politics. It's well known everywhere, how to use this anchoring to get people to behave certain ways. This one was the most puzzling to me. The guidance is the future work is at stake. I think that means if we get this contract, we'll get more work and efficiency will be measured. So if they're measuring efficiency and the future of work is at stake, the control wasn't told those things and they thought it would take 100 hours. What do these people think? It's the opposite of what I thought. They thought it will take less time. If I was told this is going to be future work's at stake, I would estimate more time because I don't want to get work that is at a discount or, that we're going to get less money for because we estimated it would take less time. And if my efficiency is going to be measured, I want to make sure that I have provided for problems and mistakes. Can we do our best work under pressure? Often not. I hope you get the picture here. That's puzzling to me. I would have come up with a higher number if I was told, probably, the future works at stake, efficiency will be measured. This has all got to do with anchoring. Now remember, I listed 15 or so biases, and that's just a short list. We need to scrutinize each of those areas and understand how these things are affecting our ability to make decisions about the software we're creating. So I've modified this quote slightly to make it more correct English. This famous quote is, "It is not the things we don't know that get us into trouble. It's the things that we know that are not so." In other words, that we have the wrong idea about. If we believe something, but it's not true, that's worse than not knowing in the first place. So we fool ourselves, and that's what I really love about this saying from Richard Feynman. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. In other words, I will fool myself easier than I could fool anyone else. I'm always fooling myself, and we need to watch out for that. I think it's a very, very important thing. So what does this mean when our estimates are accurate? People always ask me about, well, we don't need to be really accurate, or it's good to be accurate. They'll say, what should we be? And I want to say this, if our estimates are accurate, it means we are managing things to make it look like we're good at our estimates. I hope you can see that. Estimates will never be accurate. And yet we want them to be, and we'll be judged on how accurate our estimates are. We will game the system. We will manipulate the system to make it look like our estimates were meaningful. And we'll always have a reason to show why they were not. And we're going to probably place the blame on somebody else, somebody other than ourselves. I hope that's useful. Okay, I've gone through an awful lot, but I need to talk about domains. We're right on schedule, so I think we're doing good. I want to talk about domains because a lot of people, they want to argue about how useful estimates are to them, but I think we're tricking ourselves about in what kind of work estimates are helpful. And to do that, we need to understand something about domains. So we're going to look into domains for a moment. So are there domains where it makes sense to use estimates? I say there are. And I use estimates all the time for certain kinds of things. For example, when I'm managing a team and they ask me for a budget for how much will it cost to maintain the team next year, so they can put it into next year's allocation of money, I can make that estimate. Let's say I have a team of 6 people. I know how much equipment we need, how much software updates we'll need to buy, how much, or new licenses, how much equipment we probably need to replace based on our averages, how much our internet service will cost us, all of those things. How, if we lose somebody, how much will it cost to replace them? Things like that. I got enough documents with figures. I have enough information, enough data to help me make a pretty good guess. Usually, if I take last year's budget and increase it by 10 or 15%, it'll be about the same figures. That's an easy domain to make estimates. Now, there are some domains, such as, let's say you're going to go into the store to buy a box of cereal, or let's say a bag of rice. And you walk into the store, do you ask the person at the counter, can you estimate for me how much a bag of rice costs? You see, we don't estimate that. We might haggle about it, or there might be a price on it, but nobody would ask for an estimate of that. There are some things we just don't need to estimate. How much are a dozen apples? How much will that cost? Well, which kind of apple do you want? That's all the information we need to know. And a dozen of those cost you this much. So there are some domains we don't need estimates. There's some domains where they're useful, like I needed to get a new roof on my house. So I got several companies in. They all gave me a price about how much it would cost to replace my roof. They made their estimate by measuring the roof, asking me what kind of roofing do I want? Pretty straightforward. And then they gave me an estimate. It did have a part on the estimate. So it said it'll cost you this much unless we find rot, or unless there's wood underneath the roof that needs to be replaced. And that we will charge at this rate, like $50 per piece of wood or whatever it is. Do you understand? What I'm saying is we can do estimates in that domain, but what is that domain? That's what we need to talk about. So let's understand about domains. There is a lot here that we need to cover, okay? I want to talk about this concept, Cynefin. So this is really critical to me. The concept of Cynefin gives me a way to think about the domain I'm working in. It's called a sense-making mechanism or a sense-making process. It helps me better understand and make sense of where the kind of work that I'm doing, a sense-making framework. So they draw it this way. Exactly why, I'm not 100% sure, but they've got, this is what you might consider a very clear area where we probably don't need estimates. There are fixed constraints. How much does a how long will it take me to write this this advertising blurb defining my my what they call my bio? Like, how do I describe myself? I can give myself 5 minutes to write that. So I don't really need to make an estimate. I just do it and then it's done. I don't need to estimate for it. In this space, complicated, we need to figure some things out. So we sense the space we're in, we analyze the things that we need to analyze, and we respond with that. There's governing constraints. We'll give you an example of that in a minute. This is an area that they call complicated. In the clear, we can use best practices. In complicated, we can use good practices, practices that probably will help us. But in the complex space, we don't know what's coming. We don't know what's in the future, and we need to figure a lot of things out. And pretty much estimates won't work here. So estimates here aren't needed. Estimates here probably work. Estimates here, they won't work. We're in the world of discovery. And in chaotic, we don't need estimates at all. We need to take immediate action. And then we can reflect. Let's look at how this works. I'm going to show you some drawings that will explain some of this. Here where I live, I can go to the store and buy some dough that is used to make some biscuits. I think they call these biscuits. And you can make about 8 of them with this dough. If you follow the instructions, it works every time. You set the oven to 350 degrees. You open the dough, you put it on a pan, put that in the oven for a certain number of minutes, let's say 20 minutes, whatever it is. You just follow the instructions and it works every time. Okay? In the complicated space, we want something better than just those biscuits. We want a really good dining experience. And that takes an expert baker. Give me just a second. If we get an expert baker, they can make this for us, but they have to know a lot of stuff and they know the things they have to know. Okay. For example, what is the temperature in our kitchen today? Is the stove we're working with consistent in how it generates the heat? Has the dough been sitting in the refrigerator or cooling for too long or too little? Is the humidity in the room different today than yesterday? We have to take all that into consideration. We don't just follow the instructions. We're paying attention to everything that's going on around us. There are unknowns, but we know what they are. We just have to account for them. In the chaotic space, this is very different. This is called molecular gastronomy. We're trying to invent new foods. We're trying to invent a new way to mix the ingredients, new way to cook it, a new way to prepare it. There's things we need to discover. We're in the world of discovery. And that means there are going to be unknown unknowns. Let's say what we're trying to do, what we would like to do is invent a new sauce to use with chicken. But in trying to discover that, we stumble upon something that tastes really wonderful that would be a good dessert. Do we set that aside and not pay attention to it? We just discovered, something good. We're not following a recipe. We're experimenting. What we end up with, we don't even know. What we end up with, we are just looking for something good. So as we try things, we will be discovering things, but we don't know what we're going to come upon. We don't even know what we need to know. We can lay a groundwork of our expertise, but now we need to experiment. We need to try things. Then in the chaotic space is where something happens that we need to pay attention to immediately. In this case, the biscuits I'm cooking have caught on fire. We don't have time to stop and think. We might open the oven prepared with a wet towel to throw over the food, so it puts the fire out. We don't take time to reflect before we do that. We don't go, oh, look, the biscuits are on fire. What should we do next time to make it better? Because by that time, our stove is on fire, and pretty soon our house is on fire. So we react with what we think is best at the moment, whatever comes to our head. The idea is, if the biscuits are burning, we take action. We sense if we need to keep taking action, but we respond immediately. And later on, we can go back over and analyze what happened. That moves it into the complex space or the complicated space, or really the clear space. I should have paid closer attention to the amount of time or the heat. Okay. Now I'm going to go on. The people that are interpreting, please, each time I go on, let me know that I need to slow down or speed up. Give me that fast feedback, okay? Let's go on. So when I'm done making the biscuits and they look like this because they caught on fire, we can now reflect, and I can say, family, are you willing to eat this? And they might say, no, let's go out to eat at a restaurant. So that's when we reflect. But we don't do it when we have the fire. When the fire is burning, we take action. So now we have a better understanding maybe of the domains we need to deal with. So whatever we do, our domain is going to dictate the tactics and techniques that are reasonable for us to use. So we need to understand the domain. Now, I don't mean that to be a strict rule, but generally being aware of the domain we're in will help us make decisions about what kind of tactics and techniques and practices we can use. I think software development is in the complex domain. I don't know if all software development is that way, but whenever I see software development that is not in the complex domain, I question, is this really development? Because usually it's something like configuration of a system. If we are installing an enterprise system in our company, the software has already been written. The complex stuff is done. And we're moving into the complicated space now. This is an important aspect. Development itself is complex. Configuration is complicated. If we just buy software and install it, for example, Excel, then that's probably in the clear domain. We know how to use, or the simplest domain. We know how to use a spreadsheet. We might need to configure a few things, but that's in the clear space. But if we are configuring a system-wide enterprise system, that's going to be in the complicated space. We need to analyze everything, make some decisions, but we can base that on our analysis. But in software development, we're in a process of discovery. I believe that's in the complex domain. We have unknown unknowns. If we already know exactly what we need to do, we're not in the complex domain. And we rarely know that when we're creating software. So this is a saying I've used for many years. I made this up for myself. It is by doing the work, or in the doing of the work, that we discover the work that we must do. Until we start doing the work, we're just making guesses. As soon as we start doing the work, we learn what we really need to do. That's because the doing exposes reality. If we can't expose reality, we will do the thing we thought we needed, and it will be wrong. So I follow this, and we'll see how this comes into play in just a little bit. So we've got a lot of a start here, but I want to get on to some practical things. So I want to be really clear. I cannot tell you how to work. So this next part where I talk about the way I worked is not to tell you how you should work. Remember this from the early on? I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to share a few ideas. And you can use these ideas in any way you want. I hope that they give you a way to approach your work that's better than you currently have. Or at least you can help build the body of knowledge across our industry. Okay? So I'm not suggesting how you should work. it'd be impossible for me to do that. I am sharing the approach that I have used, and it's worked for me in many cases. I've been using something like this technique actually for over 30 years, but very focused in software development for over 20 years. And I've seen it work for me over and over again. So I hope you find good ways to work and that you'll share them. That's my hope. So I'm going to look at a software project as a work of art. This is a work of art. It's a piece that's meant to be displayed in an art show and for someone to display in their home. It's like an interesting collection of things that's meant to be like art, some sort of art. Our project description often is thought to look like this. This is the same thing. All the requirements that we think we need for the project. That's what this art represents. It looks like we've collected everything together. It looks like we've ordered it nicely. It looks like we have everything we need. It looks like we thought it through. I don't think this is how software development requirements actually are. I'm going to show you a work of art that I think is more like what I think. It looks more like this to me. We have a bunch of stuff we've gathered together. We can see patterns with those swooping lines, patterns of colors, patterns of shapes, patterns of, and look, it's like, it's got this white in the background down at the bottom and maybe not so much white up at the top. It kind of varies from area to other area. And we might ask, is this little area up here that's kind of yellow? Is that, or orange? Is that related to this bit over here that's orange? I hope you can see this is a lot more unknown than what this was. If we think we understand, we're probably fooling ourselves, and we don't want to fool ourselves. But I think it's even worse than this. If we look at this, we will see it's fuzzy around the edges. So what we kind of have gathered that seems at least like distinct things is here, but all around the edges and in the middle and other places, there's a lot of even more unknowns. When we get to the edges, we often don't realize how much is hidden there. This, if we walk in that direction, it might go for a long way, but we can't see that far ahead. So this is how I think projects are. So how do I work? What I try to do is I try to look for one small thing that I can start on. Rather than analyzing what somebody asked me for, I try to find one small thing that gives me a chance to start. That start allows me to do something that will give us information. It's in the doing of the work that we discover what we need to do. So that start is the beginning of the work that will help us understand what we need to learn so we can do what we need to do. Now, there's a trick to the way that I work that I think is really important that I'll cover in a bit. But the idea is if we take this approach, we will discover what is important to us and what is not important to us. These documents, these requirement documents, often contain a lot of stuff that actually isn't very important because we had to think about it before we started the real work. We try to put everything in there we think we understand, and it really isn't necessarily true. So let's move on forward here. It does not require an estimate to do this. If I take this whole project and I just find one little bit to work on, I don't need to estimate anything about it, right? So all this other stuff, I've now removed something from it, and I can look at this individually. If I look at this thing individually, I have a certain amount of knowledge I need to have. If I look at all this together, a lot more knowledge I need to have. I want something small to start with. I'm looking for something here that has certain qualities, but I'm not looking to estimate anything about this. The qualities I'm looking for is it discrete? Is it distinct? That means, does this look different from everything else? Can I understand it? Maybe I read this paper and go, boy, I don't understand all this. Can you help me understand it? So can I understand it? If it's too much to try and understand, I'm going to start trying to take it apart. We'll look at that in a minute. Here's the advantage to this. I didn't need to do an estimate. Bear with me for a second. This part and this part are smaller than those two parts together. There's no estimate to say that. They're both smaller. Are they 50% smaller? It doesn't matter. I could take off this much. I don't care about the size. I care about the qualities. Is it discrete? Is it distinct? Can we clearly see it's separate? Is it understandable? Can I understand it? I can understand this a lot easier than I can understand this. And I can understand this a lot easier than I can understand that. Hope that makes sense. Is it potentially valuable? If we deliver this, is it possible someone will find it useful? We only know possibility. We don't yet know that they'll find it useful till they have it in their hands and start trying to use it. But we need to guess. It's an estimate. Yeah, we think that will be useful. Okay. Is this cohesive? So let's take this original chunk. If this original chunk is cohesive, that means all of this must be done together. I'm looking for something I can slice out of this. Maybe this can be done without us having to do this, because this belongs together and this belongs together, but they don't necessarily need to be together. And I do it again and again and again. So when I end up with this, I have something that is discrete, it's distinct, it's understandable, it's potentially valuable, and it belongs together. Now I have something to work on. That required no estimates. I want to make this really clear. I haven't done estimates for 15 years for software. And prior to that, I took every opportunity I could to work on things that did not require estimates. When these qualities are found, we have something we can start on. I hope that's clear. All I need is something to start on. If it can be decoupled, in other words, removed from all of this so I can work on it, and then worked on, and then deployed to actual use if possible, not always possible, and then be used by the humans who will use it or the other systems that will use it. We have now a way to provide knowledge. It will provide feedback, and we can use that feedback to decide the next thing we should work on. It might be something that was in this. It might be something that was in all of this. Okay. This gives us the ability to steer. If the work can be decoupled, worked on, deployed, put into real use so somebody's using it, it provides feedback so we can steer. It's all about steering. To me, this is the big value we get from working in an agile manner, is we get to steer to the correct thing rather than having a map that takes us to what we imagine might have been the real thing that we will discover as we go. It isn't the real thing. It's all about steering. I don't know how to emphasize this too much. If we cannot steer, we are in trouble. Imagine you've been offered a new car, and you get this new car at 10% of the value of this car if you were to buy it on the open market. So you would ask, why so cheap? And they say, well, there's a flaw with this car. You can only steer once every 30 seconds. You're offered a new car at a deep discount, but the flaw is you can only steer once every 30 seconds. Would you buy that car? If you were forced to use it in the manner it currently works, you wouldn't find that very useful. If you can only steer once every 30 seconds, you couldn't drive the car. You would have to go so slow that you'd have to drive a few feet, then wait for the next 30 seconds, a few feet, you have to be correcting on a very slow feedback loop. What if they said, well, what if it was every 5 seconds? What if we could only steer every 5 seconds? Would that be a useful car? You would still have to drive very, very slowly. How often do you want to drive? How often do you want to steer is what I mean. How often do you want to steer your car? I say continuously. You need to steer continuously. Otherwise, the road would have to be perfectly straight and the car could go in a perfect straight line and it wouldn't veer off to one side or the other. We need to be able to steer. And I want that for software development. How often can we steer? Continuously. That's what this gives us an opportunity to do. So, if we can take some work to do it, and then we learn by actually doing it, that feeds our next choice. What's the next piece we should work on? Instead of saying we prioritized and planned, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the order we're going to do it in, we now have a way of steering. As soon as we're done with that little part, we can decide out of all these other things, what do we want to do next? That's what I'm trying. This is how I like to work. This little cycle is what I'm after. Now I'm going to give you an example from real life. The exact thing I just covered. A team, I should say, was working on a reporting system. This was 20 years ago. The first time I really was able to apply this in a large organization. I was called in to help a failing project. They had a reporting system. Each one of these figures represents some different part of the project. We've got a part here and a part there, and there's a little part, there's more parts everywhere. Okay, so they had actually written this document and they'd worked on it for a year and they had nothing to deliver. So they called me in to get this thing going again. And I asked them, let's change how we work. We'll try a little experiment. Tell me one thing here that you're most interested in. And they chose that. Some feature. They chose that. I need to put a message in here. Sorry about that. So they chose something to work on. We pulled it out and I took a look at it. Exactly what I did was I said, do I understand this? I read it. I went back to the people who provided it to me. It was really equivalent to maybe 2 or 3 regular printed paper. Okay. And I read it. I couldn't understand it all. It was too much. So I went back to them and said, please explain this to me again. As I started gaining some understanding, I stopped them and I said, okay, I think I understand this part. If we could write this part, if we could provide this to your users, would they find that useful? That's all I need to ask. They said, yeah. That means we could deliver it. We could decouple it. And then I asked this, let's find a distinct part of this. If you walk up to a forest and all you see is the forest, you can't walk through the forest because you're looking at the forest. You'll run into some trees. But now we have a tree, no longer the forest. We can look at the tree and we can say, what part of that tree is interesting or useful to us? And we can start taking that apart. So I'm taking the tree apart. Here's some things that I can understand that look distinct from the rest of the tree. Let's just say that's one big branch, that's another big branch, and that's a third big branch, but they're 3 separate things. And now I can review it and say, what part of this, you see it's the top part, what part of this should we start with? We can analyze this and we can determine, do all these things belong together? Can they be decoupled from the rest of it? Do we understand it? Whoops, I just pulled my microphone out. I'm going to state that over again, but I got to get my microphone back in. We've broken this down into a smaller part without needing to estimate anything. All we have to do is say, does this stuff belong together? Will it have a value? And we can bring it forward. So here's what I'm going to do with it. Do we understand this? Can we decouple these things? If we can, we will decouple it further. And if we can't, we have something to work on. If we understand it, we can do it, deploy it, learn from it, and repeat. I'm going over the same thing we went over a few minutes ago, but this is how I work. Okay. We can now act on what we learned. If we liked the first bit that we delivered and users are using it, now we can do the repeat part. We can take the next piece and we can ask, is this something we want to work on? We didn't make the decision ahead of time. With what we learned from what we just did, we can make this decision. I hope you see that. Or we can back up a little bit and go to this level and say, do we want to take on some other part of this? Pretty straightforward. But right now we can decide, no, that first thing was good enough for this part, but there's something else we need to pay attention to sooner. So we go to doing that. And then we say, okay, look at this bit over here. Now remember, we've only worked on a little bit of this, and now we're going to work on a little bit of that. Moving around helps us understand more about the system, but it's real. It's not what we thought ahead of time. It's what we have started to learn to understand. So we can repeat this over and over, trying each thing until we no longer find we have anything interesting. I'm going to go back to this. Once we've worked a little bit on that, we might work a little bit on this. We might work a little bit on that. Once we've done little bits of enough of this, we've now learned to look for what's really important. But we haven't created the whole project. We've delivered stuff to people to use, and hopefully it's helping pay for us going forward. But now we're getting real information that we can use to determine what is this project going to really provide. We discover what's useful. We discover it. We can't pretend we know it ahead of time. We can know it in the big realm. We need a reporting system for our project. Our project is used for, in this case, managing medical material, medical examinations and information. And we need a reporting system. We have the big idea. We need a reporting system. We want to discover how little of a reporting system do we need to deliver before we've delivered enough. We never want to deliver everything. We only want to deliver enough. This again is about steering. If we can steer, we can get there. Otherwise, we're going to write a lot of stuff nobody ever needs. This is essentially why I don't care much for estimates. Because if we estimate all this stuff, but we only end up doing a little bit of it, why did we bother with those estimates? They don't help us make the decision we need to make. It's all about steering. To me, that's a fundamental bit of what Agile is about. So let's look at this thing. I call it 80-20, 80-20. And many of you are familiar with the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle says in different domains, different things, but there's going to be a 20% of whatever that provides 80% of what we want. I think it started with an observation in a garden where 20% of the pea pods. Am I sharing the screen still? Can you see my screen? Yes, okay. I'm sorry. I just need to send a message. The Pareto principle observed that 20% of the pea pods that were picked contained 80% of the peas. And I think that's where it started. Could be wrong. They extrapolated that or used it for observing all sorts of things. And here we're using to say, if 20% of our, oh, I've got to change something here. Okay, sorry about that. If 20% of our project code provides 80% of what our users want, let's focus on that 20%, at least at first. And we'll discover how much of this do we really need to do. Oops, I just clicked on the wrong thing. If that's true, why don't we just work on the 20%? This is interesting to me. We can't. We need to discover it. Okay, so this is what it looks like. That little slice of green is the stuff that will actually give us most of what we want. And the 80% of the stuff only gives us a little bit of what we want. So let's focus on the 20%. So if we can find something we think will be in the 20% and we move it out, then we can work on it and try to deliver some value. But what if we only do 20% of that small bit? This is really interesting to me. That means if we can do 20% of the project, but only 20% of each part of the project we do, the actual amount of work we're going to do is 4%. If we thought this is what we needed, I'd like to discover the 4 or 5% that's really important and not do the rest of it. And in that reporting example I gave you, that was what happened. After we did about 5%, actually less than that, the product owner, the expert, came to me and said, I think we can quit working on this for now, maybe come back to it later, because we have something we think will be really even more important. That's the big value here to me. I call this deliver features until bored. In other words, don't deliver all the features. Deliver what we discover is important to deliver. That's all. And then we can keep adding if we need to. So let's crank up our ability to have many small, inexpensive attempts at value. On each little attempt, we will do, discover, validate, and then steer. Crank up our ability to do this over and over. Crank up means let's improve our capability for doing just this. If we do that, we can steer. We can make decisions about what's better. I'm going to continue on here. So it kind of can be drawn as a circle. These would be kind of the steps. We have an idea that we think the customer wants. That was represented by 2 or 3 sheets. Okay, we turn it into a story. Well, we got to break it down as we go before we can design and code. We finally get it to something. Uh-oh, my screen just started. Give me just a second. I need to restart my screen. I think I need to reshare my screen. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen? Somebody let me know. Okay. Okay. So this is exactly what Agile suggests. We'll go back. The small and expensive attempt at value will teach us what we need to know to pick the next small and expensive attempt at value. This is the cycle we will repeat and repeat and repeat. That, of course, is what Agile software development or extreme programming are about. Having these little attempts at value that we do over and over again. What we learn along the way allows us to steer. Okay. When we work this way, and I've worked this way for 15 or more years without doing the estimates, and I see a great benefit in this. but that's my own personal point of view. So I want to bring you into the end of this. Whatever you've learned today, I hope it's useful to you. If it wasn't useful to you, my hope is it will at least spark some ideas that you can think about. But this is what I want to cover for the last little bit. I always have been focused during the software development phase of my career on finding ways to make things better. And the best way that I found to do this is to look for whatever is already working well and turning that up. Often when we focus on solving problems, we're just really, our solutions are introducing our next problem. So simply by having something that's working well and turning it up a little bit has worked well for me. Okay. So let's talk about turning up the good on estimates. If we think estimates are helping us, how do we turn them up? On the other hand, we can focus on turning up the good on making it easy for us to rapidly create and deploy software so we can learn. If we could only get better at one of these two things, which would it be? Turn up the good on estimates or turn up the good on rapidly delivering potentially useful software? I think it's the second. The estimates are just used for making decisions on what we'll work on, and we get that for free in this other model of working. We don't need to make many decisions about what's next until the moment we need to know what's next. So let's kind of finish this out. The big question for me comes to this. Are we willing to question the things that we blindly accept? Are we willing to question the things that we blindly accept? An example is estimates. Everywhere I've gone, people think we must do estimates, but I don't think they've questioned that. Is it really working for them? And that's really, if I can spark you into doing that, to looking at, are the estimates really helping us? What else might we try? I've done my job today. So I kind of feel I brought it to the end, beyond estimates. So we can answer questions or cover anything else. I will let someone else guide me through that.
Hello, thank you very much, Woody. We have some questions for you, and I'm going to start with the first question,
Sure.
which is from Adrian Jolly. When decoupling an idea into smaller deliverable parts to ship it little by little, how can one be sure that the first part will be valuable enough to be relying upon for steering the implementation of the rest of the idea? In other words, he says that this reminds him of minimal viable product car image, in which a car being built is useless until it's fully built.
So absolutely, we don't know. We cannot know if the first smaller part we choose will actually be able to deliver value. That's a judgment, which could also be said, that's our estimate that it has some value. And we will not know that it will give us the knowledge we need until we do it. So this is the point. Oh, give pause, please. So perhaps we can restate the question. Is that what you're asking, Shadi?
I'm sorry?
The interpreter is asking us, saying they missed the question.
Okay, I think Shadi can see the question. It's the one from Adrian.
It's the one at the bottom of the list on mine, or next to the bottom of the list. So the question basically is, how can we know that the thing we've taken on to try is actually going to guide us? Well, whatever we learn from it will be guidance. But it may not be as helpful as we had hoped it would be, but that's why we're doing it in little parts. I'm really talking about parts that will only take a day or two to do at the most. So in other words, if we get good at breaking things down, you know, if we break this down to its most reasonable size, or I should say it's potentially valuable, it can be decoupled, it's distinct, it's cohesive, I can do it, and that's not going to take very long. That's all I'm after, is something that's broken down as far as we can break it down. In my own work, I just do them. We're usually doing 2 or 3 a day. So we're going to start learning pretty rapidly. So we have no assurance that this will be valuable, but we will learn something from it. So this will provide us some real information that allows us to make our next decision.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hopefully that was useful.
Yeah, very. So we have another question from Kukan. He's asking, if we don't have any estimates, how can we tell the people managing the project when we can actually deliver the work?
We can't.
You can't. Okay.
Is that question here?
It's in Farsi. It's
Okay.
The last question in Farsi.
We don't know. We can't predict the future. That's the whole point of this talk. If you could repeat the question, maybe I'm answering it incorrectly.
He's just asking, if we don't have any estimate, how can we tell the person who's managing the work, or our manager, when we can deliver the finished work to them?
So when we started with this talk, I made it clear, hopefully, that this isn't for those making the estimates. This is for those using the estimates. So what you need to do is make your guess and give it to them, if that's what your job is. But the person asking for them, this material was what was meant for them. That information is not going to be useful. So they need to be rethinking how they use estimates. How we do estimates is also very problematic. It's easy to estimate replacing a roof. We just measure the roof. But how do we estimate how long it will take to make really useful software that everybody wants to buy? We can't know that. We got to discover it. So yeah, if you're being asked for estimates and you got to make estimates, then you make estimates. But just understand the reality. It's a guess, no matter what process you use.
Okay, great. So another, just to add to that, what you're saying is maybe while delivering the estimate, they can point them to your talk so that they can learn from this.
So that's going to depend on your organization, your boss, and your culture. If you guide somebody to look at my talk, they might come back and say, it's not your job to tell me what to do. I already know what to do. You have to do what I tell you to do. So be very cautious about spreading this around. I have no problem with anybody watching this, but I don't want you having trouble in your work because you tried to tell your boss what to do. So every organization is different. Every country is different. Every situation is different. I've known people who got fired because they took this very idea back to their company and asked to be able to experiment with it. So please be cautious.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to another question from Saba. He's asking, so do you think that sprints, which he describes as a time box events with specific amount of effort, work, feature, etc., it doesn't work, and we should just start doing job one piece at a time?
So sprints or iterations done in a time box is a common way of working. There's no reason you can't work with what I've just described within a sprint, but we would no longer need to determine what will we get done during this sprint. So that's the only difference. In other words, it's more like Kanban than it is a sprint-oriented procedure. The best I've had working with sprints is when we chose ahead of time the five or six things we wanted to do, and then focused on only the first one till it was done. Then the second one was till it was done. It gave people who are interested an idea of what we think we're going to attack or attempt to do in the next few weeks. But yeah, I don't see any tremendous value in trying to predict what we can get done in 2 weeks. I never did understand that in the Scrum way of working. I was a certified Scrum Master for, over 15 years. I no longer keep that updated. I don't have much use for it. I understand it. I got my training from Ken Schwaber, who was one of the people who more or less invented the thing. And so I think I understand it. I frequently talked at the Scrum Gathering on this very topic of no estimates. So yeah, it's a very good observation, whoever asked the question. Like, maybe sprints aren't really needed for us.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to a question from Hamoon. He's thanking you and asking whether machine learning can change the process of prediction and estimation, and if it could produce a model based on previous data and circle back to estimate in the near future. In other words, can it help in some way to improve the estimate?
My personal, so we're asking, can we use something maybe like ideas like Monte Carlo estimating and so on, or some kind of machine learning that can figure out. So the machine learning would need to have some way to do the discovery period on the current thing we want to work on. And if the machine learning could do that, where we could take this document and it could then go, we know exactly what this is, but the discovery process doesn't feed that information. We need to discover what this is. There could come a time when humans are no longer needed for anything. Right? I mean, that's like the movie, oh shoot, where the humans are just being used for battery power by the
You mean Matrix?
Matrix. Yeah, maybe someday that will happen. Maybe not, right? I don't see how machine learning can do the discovery process yet. And if it can, well, sure, then we won't need, why would we need the estimates? The machine learning would instantly spit out the software we need. So I can't guess into the future very far. Yeah, all I'm doing is questioning, is this useful to us today and why are we doing it?
Okay.
Hopefully that's helpful.
So a follow-up question is, if we don't use estimates, how can we predict the budget we need?
We don't. That's what I was trying to say earlier. What we want to do is determine how much money we're going to need to do this. What I want to do is get good at doing way less than that, so we no longer need to try to determine how much money we'll need to deliver this whole thing. I want to deliver 4% of it. Let's think in a different way, okay? That's what I'm proposing. What we need is to have a budget to be able to operate a group of software developers. In other words, we need to have a budget that has a sufficient money in it to get people going. And then they do this, is called drip funding. We can turn up the funding or turn down the funding as needed. That's very different than the way most companies operate right now. Most companies say, how much funding do we need to turn on for next year to do these 6 projects or 1 project or whatever? I'm saying next year, let's just turn the funding up and down, depending on what we need to get done and how much quicker we want to go. Do we want to work on more stuff at the same time? We'll need more people. So please remember, this is the crux of this talk. We think we need to manage and make decisions about next year's budget. And I'm saying, I think that's harmful. Let's find a different way to make those decisions, or not make them at all. We cannot predict the future. I could go into great detail on this particular one. When we spend money to determine how much money we're going to need next year to finish this work, we are wrong. We've determined something that will be incorrect, but we'll manage it as if I got to send a message. I am seeing, Shadi, I'm seeing your messages come across to me, but maybe I'm not seeing all your messages. I'm only seeing you asking me, am I receiving your texts? You've asked that several times, and that's what I'm seeing. I don't know that I'm seeing anything else. Okay. So the basic idea is all the way that we are currently managing, we probably need to change or improve. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I've got another question. This is quite a technical one. I think it goes back to Scrums. Hamid is asking, what is your idea about WSJF? Which I think
I'm not sure what that is. Yeah.
Okay, so that's weighted shortest job first. It's kind of addressing backlogs in Scrum, I think. I'm not an expert.
Yeah, okay, I'm familiar with that.
Okay, so how would we then do that? Is that somehow valid still based on what you're saying?
If you need to make estimates to get that weighting, the weighted value there, then I would say probably not.
Right.
Again, the estimates give us no real information. So we're going to do that based on guesses. And we can guess other stuff. And we can guess, is there something here that we think gives value? Do we think we understand it well enough? We'll discover, do we understand it well enough in trying to do it? That's maybe when we'll find, oh, wait, we didn't understand enough. We'll understand, can it be decoupled? We might start learning, oh, wait, this can't be decoupled. It's in the doing of it that we will discover the things we can't know before we start on it.
Okay. So Adrian is asking, what's your opinion on Basecamp's shape-up approach, in which the appetite, in other words, what we're willing to invest, seems to replace estimates?
That's basically what I'm saying. So the drip funding idea is, if we're getting good stuff, let's get more. I'll give an example. Imagine you've gone to a buffet in a hotel or whatever to get your breakfast, and they have a huge choice of things to get. We have a buffet with a bunch of food we can choose from. It all looks good because they make it to look good. And as we go up, we can choose what we want to eat. So do we take a whole plate of one thing, then go back to our table and eat that whole thing? What we normally do is we say, that looks good, we get a little bit. That looks good, we get a little bit. That looks good, we get a little bit. Then we go back to our table and we can taste them. We go, oh, this isn't so good. I don't want any more of that. This is really good. I'm going to get more of that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I think the idea is kind of revolutionary for people who are used to doing estimates.
Exactly.
And a lot of the questions are very similar. It's a kind of not quite understanding, or maybe not quite willing to take that concept. So I have another question, for example, which is similar to what I had in mind before your talk, which is, when you have limited resources in a company that you've started, maybe, or a small company, without any kind of planning and budgeting, how can you expand your company? Are there any examples where your ideas have allowed the company to build and grow and be more successful?
I've applied these ideas myself in a number of situations. I have also had a number of companies, representatives of companies or employees, come to me after I've given a talk and explained that they work in exactly the manner I described, and they don't set aside what we're going to do in the next 2 weeks or the next 6 months or the next year. So I know people are doing this, not based on what I've taught, but because it is another way to work. None of these thoughts are original with me. To me, this is what Agile is. Okay. So this is the thing. We believe we need to do estimates because that's the way business is commonly done. Now, if you remember, if we go back to my very first slides, this is what I'm questioning. So I'm asking you to question this as well. Let me go back to a very early slide. This one here from Admiral Grace Hopper. Hopefully everyone can see that. Humans are allergic to change. Can you see that?
Yes.
They love to say, we've always done it this way. I try to fight that. I have not seen estimates create success. What I've seen is Breen's law. We succeed in spite of us doing the estimates. Not because we're doing the estimates, but because there is so much money to be made in software development that we still can make money, even though we're using processes that are not working for us. And all I'm asking is that you explore the ways you're working and determine what is working for you and what is not, and encourage you to not accept what you are told or currently believe. That's all. Now, somebody asked, I want to answer this one. To make it clear for me, are you suggesting that we can skip estimates or rely on it and prioritize based on the end customer only and the effort and distinct parts? I don't do estimates. Almost all the software I've worked on that I thought was very useful and we had a very good process was when we did not do estimates. And I took in 2009, I believe, could have been before that, I decided I'm not going to do estimates at all anymore. I'm not going to work for places that require the estimates. So you need to think about this yourself. Remember what I said earlier, or even this, people become very defensive about working this, they want to protect the way they're currently working with no proof that what they're doing is working. They would like me to prove that what I'm suggesting works. I'm not willing to try to prove that. I'm suggesting here's an alternative that's worked for me. You might be interested in it. Not you must do this. So people become defensive, and I'm saying we benefit by keeping an open mind. What if what I'm saying has some level of truth in it? What if it's not the complete truth, but some level of truth, something that might be useful? You might want to ponder that. So again, I'm going to read here, trying to paraphrase the previous question. Did NoEstimates, as Woody practiced it, ever work successfully in a startup context by making a business scale 10 times, 100 times more? I don't know how we would know that. I don't know how we would know. The company that I mentioned that does not use estimates, I could look up the number of employees, but they're extremely large, Indian-based company with thousands of employees. And they distinctly told me and showed me how they work without estimates. Another company that I worked with very recently had about only 150 employees. They were pretty much a startup. They're, the head person in the company, CEO, had come to a workshop I did in 2017, and they've been applying the NoEstimates approach to grow to 150 employees, and they continue to grow. So I have no proof, and I'm not offering any proof. I'm telling you, I'm inviting you to think about these things and maybe make some room to experiment with it in your own organization. But please provide proof to me that estimates are helping you make good decisions. I would love to see how that works. I would love to see if anybody's got a way to prove that the estimates are actually useful and meaningful and good in their operation. My experience has been they are not. So use what I've taught you today to consider some of these things. I hope that's useful to you. So somebody's asked, they're curious how I personally approach the situations in which you are asked to give an estimate. This goes back for me to 1992, before I was doing software development for a living, I had a small manufacturing company where I was manufacturing what you would call custom manufacturing. In my custom manufacturing, people would always ask for estimates. Then I had a customer come to me and they had an emergency. And they did ask, about how much will this cost? And I answered, I have no way to know. And if I would take the time to make you an estimate, we'll run out of time to solve your emergency. They had something that needed to be done in 3 days, and I knew it would take me longer than that to make the estimate. What we did instead of making an estimate is exactly what I described here. We took some small part of what they needed. They had a number of things they needed, and we accomplished it. A small part of that small part. And then we said, what should we do next? As we were gaining confidence as to what we could get done, we were getting things done. That changed a lot of thinking in my brain, that I no longer want to work with people who are asking for estimates. I'd like to work for people who want to get stuff done. Big difference. I know I'm probably going too fast. My conversational style kind of forces me to say things as they come through my brain. I'm trying to slow down a little bit. So yeah, so how do I work with it now? That led to me understanding this. If you know how effective something is, and you want to work with people who are only willing to try that, then that's what you look for. I stopped trying to do work for people who are always asking for estimates. And I started working for people who are looking for ways to get more value, get things done more directly. And they're interested in that. As they know they're going to spend money. Let's find out what's the least amount of money we can spend. Once somebody's done this, it changes how they work. They no longer have to figure out everything up ahead of time. They no longer have to deal with the always changing requirements. They don't have to deal with our estimates always being off. I hope you understand. That's all I'm saying. Try it. Think about it. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question in Farsi, which is similar and sort of quite interesting. This person, Merdad, I think, is asking, if we don't have estimates, how can we make commitments? I guess it means to a contract or to a customer.
It will be a different commitment. It's what I just described. We need to start working with people who want to get value rather than have the estimates. I think we've used up our 2 hours. We could spend another 2 hours talking about this.
Yeah, we've got 1 minute left. So if you want to choose any of the other questions to answer, or I can give you a Persian one or two.
So there is a question about how can we be sure our estimation is valid and true, especially for startups at the early stage. We can't. That's the whole point. I don't use estimates. I do not know a way to make estimates, to verify our estimates. We find out later that we were off.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to thank you very much again, Woody. It's been an absolute pleasure and a great learning experience for everyone, I'm sure, and for me, definitely. And thank you for everything and participating in the DDD Iran presentation. And I want to thank our sponsors, Shurju Company and Seper and Ruhollah for helping organize this webinar. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you at the next presentation. Thank you. Bye.
I'm assuming we're all done. It looks like there's still a lot of people here.
Good job, Woody.
I'm sorry, I really tried to slow down best I could, but having the really rapid feedback, that was most helpful.
Thank you, Woody. You did your best.
Thank you. I wish I could have done better. We probably needed to practice this,
Definitely.
but I had a great time. Thank you for your patience with me.
Same here. Thank you. Seems you're very interested in your field and you can't stop, speaking. You can't help speaking quickly while you're explaining this field.
Yeah, if I'm forming a question, I can't pause, or I'm forming something to say, I can't pause in the middle of doing that. I would have to practice that.
I
So it's
see.
very hard to pause at the end of a sentence because the next sentence is part of it. And I'd have to practice that. But I loved it. This was great. So I think we're still recording. I think that we can, I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting, I think. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Woody. It was really great to know you and to get to know you and to get to know your actually passions,
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I had a great time.
Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
Woody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye bye.